Welcome. My name is Karen Casella, and I'm the Director of New Student and Family Programs at American University. And it is really so great to have you joining us for this session. This session today is actually a re-recording. It was such a popular and well-received session earlier. We wanted to just go ahead and send it out there again and make sure that everybody could access this as needed. And families, if we don't get to address your questions in this session, on our last slide, you'll see our contact information. And you are always welcome to reach out to us at auparent@american.edu. Now, with that, families, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to my colleague, Dr. Jacqueline Darby. She's the Director for Outreach and Consultation in the Counseling Center. Yes?
Yes. Last time I tried. Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Jack, I'm going to let you, your bio is so much better than I could get into. So I will let you introduce yourself.
That's totally fine. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Jackie Darby. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, a certified group psychotherapist, and I'm the Assistant Director of Outreach and Consultation at the American University Counseling Center. So I'm here to talk to you about how to support stressed out students. Like I mentioned before, this is a re-recording because the first time it was great and we're so into it that we forgot to hit the record button. So we're doing it again just to make sure the information is out there. So today we're going to talk about what student stressors are, what students are facing. We're going to talk about our campus resources. We're going to talk about how parents and families can support stressed out students. And then we do have some questions and answers that we had from the previous presentation. So when we're thinking about student stress, we want to acknowledge that there's a lot of things happening with the students at any point in time in the semester. Not only do you have midterms, thinking about fees, thinking about relationships, you may have them concerned about their schoolwork, thinking about what's life after the semester is ending, as well as trying to make friends on top of COVID, on top of the social injustices and political unrest that's happening, on top of the fact that we are now in the winter months. So there's sometimes some seasonal depression that is happening along with that. All that is happening with the student trying to make it through the academic year. So with that being said, this is how we can help. And so at the Counseling Center, our website is on the screen. It will also be provided later on. We have an array of services that are available for the students to help them not only adjust to being at AU, but adjust to being a college student and help address all those various stressors that I just mentioned before. The first thing we have is AU protocol services. This is our 24/7, 365, 366 of the leap year crisis line that our students can use anytime, day or night, regardless of location. So they're not bound by their physical location. That number is 202-885-7979. It's also helpful for students and families and parents who are expressing concern regarding a student and would like to have consultation on the best way to get support for their student. Again, that number is 202-885-7979. If the student is interested in individual therapy, we do offer time-limited services, so 6 to 8 sessions per academic year, and that just allows for us to be able to serve as many students on campus throughout the years. So a student can come into our center, schedule an initial consultation appointment. We do offer very limited in-person sessions. Both parties have to be masked, the student and the therapist, but the majority of our services are offered virtually, where the student has to be physically present in DC for the services due to licensure laws. So the student can schedule an IC appointment by visiting us when we're on campus or by calling our front office desk. And from there, we can start engaging them into the services. We also offer unlimited group therapy services. So we have 3 similar types of groups that address different needs. One type of group looks at how a student makes friends, how do they receive care, how do they give care. One group looks at different identity factors, LGBTQ+, being a person of color on campus, identified as a Black identified individual on campus, survivor of sexual assault, grief and loss concerns, those type of identities, as well as how to deal, which is like a class, teaches students skills, tips, and tricks on how to manage anxiety, depression, interpersonal effectiveness. Our groups are unlimited, meaning they can start in the beginning of the semester and continue with the same group for the whole academic year without touching the individual therapy sessions. We also have apps because we recognize people sometimes like to be on their phone. And so we have You at American, which is a helpful platform for students to get an overarching view of wellness on AU's campus. as well as the MySSP app, which we have partnered with LifeWorks to provide culturally informed, solution-focused care for students in a variety of languages. They can call through the app or they can text to a support person through the app. And that's free and available 24/7, 365. And again, it's not bound by location. So they can be studying in DC, studying on California, studying in England, and still be able to get access through care through the MySSP app. We also offer anonymous mental health screens if students are just curious about their mental health and like, hey, what do these symptoms mean? If I'm not sleeping, if I'm not eating, if I'm constantly worrying, is that anxiety or is it something else? These free mental health screens that are available through our website kind of starts that conversation for the student. We also offer workshops, presentations where we do different things from self-care to test anxiety to talking about conflict within relationships, allowing students to engage with each other as well as learn different skills for their mental wellness. And lastly, we also provide consultation. So this could be if parents have questions regarding their own students' mental health concern, like, hey, what's the best course of action? How can I support the student? You can call us for those questions. If students are looking for referrals out from the community and like, hey, I want to go off campus, but I really don't know who's the better provider for me, we can help students get connected with those providers that we feel might be a best fit for them based on what the student is concerned with, as well as what we know about the provider. We have a huge database that we're constantly updating and rehashing of providers in the area. So in the DC and Maryland, as well as Virginia. So we don't want to just bombard students with like a whole bunch of lists, but rather like, hey, of this 5 to 7 people we think will be a good fit. And if they're not, come back, we can pull for some more. So we can, students or parents can call for the information regarding how do I get connected to referrals. Additionally, AU protocol services, as well as the MySSP app, also will help for students get connected to community providers. Other resources, because wellness is not just mental health, is also could be physical, it could be spiritual, it could be just overall wellness. We have different offices on campus that we partner with. So Rec Fit is our fitness facilities. They have group classes, they have trainers helping students to get moving, especially during the time of the pandemic. It's kind of hard sometimes to find movement. And so Rec Fit allows for online classes as well as in-person classes safely with COVID precautions. We also have the K-Switch Life Center, which helps with chaplains and different programs for spiritual needs. There's walking trails. We're beautiful arboretum on AU's campus, so encouraging students to get out, walk, observe the trees, the plants, the various squirrels that are on campus. We also have the HPAC, which is Health Promotion and Advocacy Center. This is for general overall wellness. So students have questions regarding mindfulness, regarding alcohol and drug concerns, regarding sexual health. This is the office that housed that, and they're able and willing to help students with that. They also have a peer health educators program, which are students who identify as having interest in helping students with their overall wellness. So it's a peer talking to a peer, helping provide the education, and sometimes students feel a little more comfortable talking with another person who are their same age rather than talking to a therapist or such. We have our lovely resident hall staff, our RAs, the community directors who are there for students to provide support, academic advisors, as well as academic support and access center, which provides tutoring, academic coaching. Also, the academic support and access center is where students go for accommodations. I often tell students, if you had accommodations in high school or in other schools, and you're like, maybe I don't need an AU, it's always better to start that process to have those accommodations in place. If you don't use them, that's great. But if you do need them, they're already there and happening. The Counseling Center does not partake in the Academic Support Access Center's accommodation request. We are 2 separate offices, but we can help you find providers in the community that can fill out the documentation for that. So something to note when thinking about supporting your students is that, one, you always want to normalize feelings of stress that your students can feel being away from school. As I mentioned before, there are so many different pressures that are happening for a student in addition to going to school that it can be sometimes overwhelming for students, and that's totally fine. It does happen. Just remember that feelings have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so able to normalize the feelings of stress allows our students to go through that process and not just get stuck in that emotion. We want to encourage and empower your student to seek support as needed. Sometimes students feel like, oh, no one can help me. I'm all in this by myself. And I'm like, no, like High School Musical, we're all in this together. So please encourage them to seek out support. It could be a protocol. It could be the MySSP app. It could be the counseling center. It could be community referrals. Whoever they feel they need to build on their team in order to help them succeed, please reach out to those offices. I will take note to talk about confidentiality. So at the center, we do have confidentiality, meaning that whatever happens at the center stays at the center. And there are some limitations to that. And that's if someone thinking about hurting themselves, hurting someone, or killing someone else, or active abuse of a vulnerable population. So we may have to break those rules, but for the most part, whatever happens at the counseling center stays at the counseling center. So if you call to say like, hey, I want to know if my student is seeing a therapist, I will have to say, I cannot confirm or deny that I know who you're talking about. And that's not to be rude or to be disrespectful. I get it. You want to make sure your student is getting the support that they need. However, it's to protect the confidentiality of the student. If the student signs or gives some information that allows me to talk to you or to identify a person regarding their mental health concern, then I'm more than welcome to do that. But until that happens, I will have to deny or cannot confirm or deny that I know who that student is. The counseling center is always able to receive information. So if you want to, hey, I want to pass information along regarding my student, we can always receive information. However, we sometimes cannot contact the student directly because of our own ethics and HIPAA laws. So if you need someone to reach out to a student, I recommend submitting a care report or contacting the dean of students for that. So after you have normalized your students' feelings, you've empowered them to seek support, you want to trust that you're actually able to provide the student with support and trust that your student will be able to navigate that moment. Oftentimes we want to go and reach out and pull our students out of the stress and make sure like, okay, you're good, everything's okay, everything's fine and perfect, which is great. However, the students sometimes don't learn that, hey, they can navigate their distress on their own. They can actually build the resilience they need in order to make it through. So trust that you have implanted in them all the tools they need to succeed. In fact, they're here, they're at AU, you did it. You have implanted all the tools that they need to succeed. Now give them the opportunity to actually use the tools that you have given them. So trust that you'll be able to manage and help them through the difficult times, but also trust that your student will be able to do it themselves and actually able to navigate through that. Remember, emotions have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So you want to help them get through and knowing that they can actually get through. So this is where I'm going to turn it over to Karen to defer to her because she's the parent and family engagement expert. But that is their email on their website, as well as follow them on Facebook. There's newsletters once, twice a month, as well as fan weekends, live webinars, or recorded ones when the live doesn't really want to work sometimes. Dedicated staff, but most importantly, the email address at the bottom at auparent@american.edu.
Well, there, you've done my job for me, Jackie. Thank you. That was a great overview. I think hopefully families by now, you've come to recognize some of the resources that we do have for parent and family engagement. I know that the university is a big and sometimes overwhelming place, and we really want to make sure that you feel like you've got a central point of entry. And from there, I work with my colleagues like Jackie and the others across campus to help make sure we got what we need for your student. So Jackie, there's some questions that I get a lot from families. And so let's see if we can go through a couple of these. Like, I know you talked early about how students access services for one-on-one counseling and therapy. So if I remember correctly, they get 6 to 8 sessions in an academic year, right?
Correct, yes.
And if a student's needs seem to be more intense than that, especially like say students who maybe have already had a history of having a therapeutic relationship before they come to AU, how do we help them manage that if 8 is not enough?
So a couple of ways. One, they can join one of the unlimited groups. That's a possibility because sometimes I tell people in individual therapy, you talk about your concerns, but in group, you practice them. So you're able to use the tips and tricks you learn individual to actually in a real safe environment that still have 2 therapists, it's small, 6 to 8 people, and you can practice all the skills you learn in individual. But people are like, it's a lot. I don't want to do all that. So what we can do is help them find referrals off campus that are either nearby the campus or accessible by metro or the bus that use their insurance or not use their insurance, depending on their financial situation. So we help them get connected to off-campus providers with that.
Excellent. And I've seen too that on the website for the counseling center, there's there's a tab specifically for referral assistance, right? So students, but also families can reach out if they need some assistance navigating local providers, right?
Absolutely. That's my favorite part, is help families find people, providers who can get connected to.
Perfect. And I like the AU location is great for it. There's a lot of really highly qualified providers within a walking distance or a shuttle stop from the main campus. So
yes, I also think I can throw a walk and hit a therapist in DC. So
yeah,
the DMV is a very prime area for mental health concerns.
Yeah, yeah. So along these lines with the appointments, I often hear from parents, they're sharing with me that their student says they can't get an appointment, right? They're like, the next appointment's not for 8 weeks. And a parent says, that can't be possible. And I say, Jackie, I'm pretty sure that can't be possible, but what is happening?
You're right. So that can be possible. We tend to schedule 2 weeks at a time. We have appointments from 10 to 5 that we can slot people in. Sometimes what happens is that our next available appointment is not with the student schedule. So they may have to wait a little bit because their schedules aren't matching. And although we do try our best to have a wider range of available appointments, sometimes it's not working out just quite yet. So if that happens, students are able to use the AU protocol because that's 24/7. So they can always call that number to talk to a licensed provider any day or night to get assistance, as well as the MySSP app that's also available 24/7. But like I said before, we currently don't have a waiting list. We currently have openings for virtual IC appointments because we're virtual right now into the month of January. So there's available. And so if a student's like, hey, I'm really trying to get an appointment, they can call, leave a voicemail. Our front office staff will call them back. So if a student sees a blocked number, it's probably us because our number appears blocked on the phone. So we do leave a voicemail. So if voicemails are set up, we leave a voicemail with the call back of, hey, we're trying to schedule an appointment. So we encourage people to listen to the voicemails. I know it sounds inundated, like who does that? But listen to your voicemails, pick up unknown numbers, and call us back. We're willing and willing to make these appointments because we want to make sure your students get the help they need as fast as they possibly can.
There are so many good kernels of tidbits and tips in that. Thank you. I mean, I think for so many of our young adults, if this is the first time they're starting to book their own appointments, they're not used to the conflicts that they might have, right? Maybe there's a club meeting or they've made plans with a friend. And so, I think for some students, they have to really determine for themselves what the priority is at the moment. But I can imagine, I know my own young adults as they were going through therapy had a very set schedule, and it was always, like after school on a certain date. So they didn't have to encounter this decision making. And it just kind of flowed. And I was the one who had set that up initially, right? So this is like a whole different process for our students. And I don't know if we mentioned before, right? But parents cannot set these appointments for their students with AU.
Yeah, unfortunately not. Once a student is over the age of 18, they themselves have to set the appointment up. And that's also just to protect their students because we can't guarantee it's the actual parent of that student contact. We don't know. So just to make sure, verify everyone's information, and we may ask the student questions that the parents don't know. So having a student make that phone call to make that appointment is what is the best way to do it.
Very true. Very true. I think, this is also a big time to shift what that parent relationship is with their student's therapist, right? Because we really are pretty strict with this, that we can't share whether students participated or what has been shared in those sessions without a student's express permission. And it's for each session, right? Like a student can really put the parameters on what gets disclosed and to whom.
Exactly. So in that written release of information, it's limits of, okay, exactly what do you want people to know? Do you want to know people that you came? Do you actually want to know like what the goal of treatment is? Do you want them to know what the recommendations are? Like they kind of set that parameter. And that's to empower them to feel like, yes, I can make the determination for my health and what I feel is necessary for me, but also provide that safety because then they get like, okay, I can actually be honest about what I'm feeling and going through, knowing you're not going to run and go back and tell my parents. But I also tell people this, I really believe in the team approach when it comes to wellness, not just myself, but the staff. And so we feel like, you know what, I think your parent needs to be involved in this. We really have the conversation with the student, like, let's get them involved. Let's make sure we're all open about care. So that way it's not, you have to go run and hide. It's like, let's just be honest. So I would do talk to students, like, I think it's best if we have a release so that I can talk to your parent can talk to me, and we can be open and honest about care. So if we feel like it's in the best interest of the student, we will have that conversation.
I think it's so important for our families to hear that, because I find that not just with your team, but our academic advisors, our dean of students office, like all these offices do kind of engage with students with an ear for like, hey, is this something we need to share with your parents? Like, let's consider what that might look like. And so I think everybody's on that same page. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that I get asked a lot too is parents expect that there's a blanket permission that they can have their students sign. And I know for sure the health center doesn't allow that. I don't believe you all do either, right?
No.
And the other part of it, I think, is how do I put this? So, like they're keen to learn more. Is it do we try to set up like appointments with the student to invite their parents to join them, those kind of things. But I also hear from parents who are like, well, wait, where's that form on your website? How do I get that form so I can have my students sign it, right? And I think it's helpful to remind parents that it's not there because it's not your call to make a parent. It is a student's choice, and that comes out of the therapeutic session, and that's where they'll be able to talk through the permission. This is not something a parent can request or hand their student. So I think it's nice. It kind of equalizes it and gives students some more voice and power in that relationship more authentically, which is really important. I also hear from a lot of parents when they're concerned about their students, and they're not sure what to do with that concern. How do I flag to get somebody's attention that my student has had some issues in the past and might need some eyes on, kind of thing. So you mentioned the care report earlier. I'll just say that one of the things that I can do from my office for families is I can submit a care report on your behalf. That's a very easy thing to do. I do it all the time. And so you just drop me an email to AU parent. I mark the case as confidential so other people can't access the information you choose to share with me. And we talk through what information we want to share and whether we want your student to know that you're the one who shared that concern or not. And then it activates the care team. But Jackie, can you talk about what the team does?
I can talk a little bit about it because I'm not on it. So the care team is made up of various offices that help support students. So it's the counseling center, the dean of students, the student health center, I think the resident life, and then maybe one more who is part of that care team.
Academic units? I think the academic.
It might be an academic unit.
Yeah.
And they meet once a week to discuss students who they feel like, hey, we need to make eyes on this person. How do we get them connected to different offices? Even within that, if we don't have this information, sometimes we can't share openly with that. But so that's what the network is. It's the best way to support students through their time at AU. Now, like I mentioned before, the counseling center is always open to receive information. We may not be the best place to give out information. So if a parent is concerned about a student, they can always call. They can always consult. We may just hold on to it, put it in our notes just in case a student comes. So we kind of have an idea of what we need to support the student already in place. But what we can't do is call us to say, hey, you need to come and make an appointment because your parent called was concerned. We can't do that, unfortunately, because of our own ethics and licensure laws. But if you need someone to really like, hey, I need you to meet with my student right now because I'm concerned, the best course of action is the care network or to contact the dean of students directly to make that alert. Like, hey, I need someone to do a wellness check, or I need someone to actually meet with my student because I'm concerned.
Yep. And I do think that they're better positioned to take that more proactive role, right? So if something feels very urgent, if a family has noticed a sharp change in behavior. But the other thing I really love about the care report is anybody on campus can submit these. And so it may be the case that other people are starting to notice some shifts in behavior as well. And so, it really is valuable to submit these reports because it helps raise sort of attention levels, right, and urgency. We can see some patterns that individually people may not acknowledge. Okay, so here's another thing I hear from a good bit, and a parent that I had worked with before when I was asking like peer-to-peer advice, and one of my parents had shared with the others, like learning to figure out when your student is calling you just to vent and when they're actually in a crisis where they need your help. And I'm wondering whether you see this play out and what tips you might have for families about how you make that determination. Like how do you make that a productive conversation and understand when you should step in at this time when we're all trying to help these young adults learn how to do for themselves.
Mm-hmm. I'm a direct person, so I will say this. I tend to say, just ask, do you need me to help or do you need me to vent? Ask your student will be able to tell you exactly what their need. Now, if you feel your student's life is in danger, there's immediate risk, then you can go ahead and step in to assist because we'll make sure the student is safe. But we're assuming everything is fine, the student's just very stressed. Maybe they're worried about a midterm. Do you need me to actually solve this or do you just want to complain and vent? And that's totally fine too. But that gives the student the option like, oh, let me assess what I need before I go asking for another person. And maybe it is just a vent, or maybe actually, I need you to sit down with me and help me problem solve this. But they get to make that decision. So yep. I'm more direct. So just ask, they'll let you know.
I love it. I think sometimes that also characterizes some of the calls I'm getting from families, right? Where it's like, okay, so where's the question that I can assist you with, right? Or the actionable step, because I'm hearing and I appreciate all of the concern that I'm hearing, or the anxiety that you're bringing with you to this question, but like, let's nail this down to what's the actionable thing we can do here and focus on it. So I totally hear you. I'm kind of also loving that we're offering this up at the start of the semester, because Jackie, I'm sure your offices get this. I certainly get it from families when classes are over in 2 days and their student is calling them because they're having a complete meltdown about their assignments and their schedule and what they think they can't do and deliver on. And we have so many great resources to help students, but very few of them are going to do a whole lot for them in those 48 hours before the end of the semester. Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to make light of it, because it's really hard, I think, for a parent to hear that and to feel like there's nothing that they can do in that moment to help their student, because our students are still calling their families for support. We know that, and the parents want to be there for them. Do you have any recommendations for how a parent can respond when they've got their student like in crisis? Like, what are some effective strategies to help a student kind of get present and take some steps?
Well, first thing I encourage people to do is take a deep breath. I'm like, just take a big deep breath, right? Because your mind's going a million miles a minute because you're panicking about something's happening 48 hours from now. Just bring you back to the present moment. Take a deep breath first. Second thing, what can we do right now? What are our steps? Right now, it might be, let's email the professor. Hey, let's do this. I'm kind of concerned about this grade. Or it could be, let me just do this assignment and then we'll see what the next steps could be. Sometimes the things that we can do them now, but they won't really take place until after the semester has ended. So there's no sense of like that sense of urgency real quick if the impact is not going to be felt until later on. That could be an incomplete, that could be talking to the professor, getting a grade change, it could be different things. But when a student is in distress, as a parent, and they're calling a parent, I always recommend just take a deep breath. What can we do right now in the situation? And can you make it the next 48 hours? Like, can you put this panic on hold for 48 hours? After that, go ahead. You can have this meltdown. I believe in planned meltdowns. I fully believe it. Schedule it on your calendar. But can we hold off for 48 hours before we do this? And sometimes that's actually helpful. It's like, okay, I'm not denying my experience. I'm just putting it on pause for right now. So that's what I encourage you.
Yeah.
Take a deep breath. Ask what can you do in this moment. And if we can hold the meltdown until 48 hours.
Yep. I know that I had the chance to teach undergrads for about 9 years, and we would always have to stop mid-semester and have a full dedicated conversation about where we were feeling stress-wise and managing assignments. And the class I was teaching had an awful lot of assignments. And so my strategy with students was like, hey, let's set you up for success with life. Like, there's an awful lot of assignments. And so one, it seems to me that it's an unrealistic expectation that you're going to nail every one of these out of the park, right? So knowing that and recognizing that life happens and things get disrupted, like how do we look at the syllabus and say, these are the things that are weighted more, right? These are the opportunities to redo assignments that you didn't get, like, so that you can show me that you incorporate my feedback. And I think one of the main things I tried to impress on my students was, it is my job to assess your work. So don't let your fear of turning in something imperfect keep you from turning in something, right? Because you turning in something that's imperfect means now we've got something to work together on and collaborate around to see some improvement over the course of the semester. That's like the exciting stuff as a teacher. If students were only giving me things that I don't need to really look at or dig into, or and I can't advise them on anything, then there's not a whole lot to gauge whether we're learning. So I think, yeah, helping our students let go of feeling like they have to be perfect every time probably makes a big difference. I certainly did in the classroom.
Yeah, I always tell students, make your teacher do the work. You got a question, ask. That's their job, is to help you teach. So make them teach you.
That is
go to
so
office
good.
hours.
Yeah.
Turn paperwork in, get the feedback. Let them bust out the good red pen. Like, it's okay. That's their job. Let them do, you're doing your part, now let them do their part. If you try to make it perfect, like you're saying, you can't do your part of teaching. And that's what you like to do. So, right. Yeah.
No, I love it. All right, that's good. I was going to ask you, like, what kind of things are we hearing from students? I want to give families a sense of like how normal is some of this stress, right? How acute is it? And maybe, Jackie, if you're learning things about ways that parents' reactions or interventions are helpful or less helpful, right? Like, so what do students say about how their parents support them best?
What I really hear is students appreciate when parents just listen, and to really allow them to sometimes sit in their mess for a little bit. I hear the concern that parents want to go in and just like pull their students out of that distress. And the students hear that too, but sometimes they're like, it feels very limiting if they know like you're just gonna just save me. And I don't want that. I don't need that. So what's helpful is really allowing the student to go through the motions of the stress and trusting that they'll be okay, but being close enough that if they ever need you, you can step in and help. But sometimes they just need to know that you're there. And know that you have their back and that you support them. You don't have to solve it for them. So that's the big takeaway I hear a lot from students.
I love it. When I'm talking to the families of our newest admitted students, one of the things that I get really excited about for them is like, hey, your student did all this work, this whole history of their being to become this person that we selected to be part of this campus community because we believe that they're going to add value and that they're going to do well. And so the best thing that we can do now, as hard as it may be as parents, is let them prove to us that we're right? Let them prove, because then they have the pride of knowing and owning that they have figured this stuff out, right?
Exactly.
That they know how to make their own appointments, or to talk to a professor, or to go pick out some laundry detergent down the street. I mean, just all of those things that they get to take pride in for falling on their own. So, I also heard a good bit from some families. We know a lot of students have been really struggling during COVID. It's been a challenging run for everybody. And at the same time, a lot of our students are not used to having roommates with people that they have not grown up with and loved for most of their life. And so sometimes these come together. I heard from a number of families this year who were concerned because their students' roommate seemed to be having some mental health issues. And that seemed to be affecting, their living arrangement, right? Their shared space, like their sense of space or ownership of that, or like their comfort. Or do we have any tips or advice for how students can navigate this if their roommate seems to be having a hard time? Like, where do they go? How can they open these conversations?
Yes, I will say my camera decided to stop working at this current moment. So I'm still here.
All right, I see you.
Okay. Just want to acknowledge that. But yeah, so One is the AU protocol. Parents can call to get consultation about how do I navigate or help my student navigate the roommate situation. The students can also contact their RAs, their community directors. They're also good places where they can also help support the roommate. The student also themselves can submit a care report if they're concerned about their roommate as
That's
well.
true. Yeah.
But I do want parents and students to recognize that you don't have to save the roommate either.
Valid. Yep.
And so while, yes, you're taking note and you put those things in place to find ways to support that roommate, you don't have to take on the burden of, I have to save them. No, that's not your responsibility. You did all the thing by learning the right people, but after that, you've done your part. Now it's up to them to do their part. And so, yes, contacting the RA is probably the first thing for a roommate, a student to do, because they'll be in the best position. AU protocol, the dean of students, the care report, all great options as well.
Yep. This sense of like coming to know and communicate boundaries is healthy for all of us. And it also makes me think of, then that underscores the need for self-care in general, right? Like making sure that you have a healthy and vibrant social network on your own and that you're engaging in good self-care practices.
Absolutely.
Another trending topic every year, usually about the first 6 weeks or so in to the semester, families who are concerned that their student doesn't seem to be finding their social network on campus yet. And sometimes this is coming from parents of students who might claim themselves that they're introverted. And other times it seems like their students just normally extroverted, but just really seems to be having a hard time putting themselves out there. What are the kinds of tips we offer to our students about how they can navigate these new relationships?
I think one is to give it time. If you think back over high school, you've known these students for a while. You may have grew up with them, so you have that time built in. It may take time to get those deep friendships. Then also just taking the risk of starting a conversation. Hey, I was asked the homework help. Like, hey, I'm struggling with this homework assignment. Did you get it? Or did you get these notes? Or what did they say in that last thing? You may have already know the answer, but that's a great way to start that conversation. You're with your classmates for the semester, so you have that time to build that friendship. And also just to give yourself grace. Like, these are interesting times right now. And so people may be a little hesitant of like fully going into a deep conversation, not because they don't think you're worthy of having that deep conversation, but because maybe they're nervous themselves. So just giving some grace and not assuming the worst, like, oh, they won't be my friend because of I did something, but rather maybe they're just nervous about having a mask on and they're like, I'd rather not. It has nothing to do with you. So give yourself time, take the risk of starting these conversations and start off small, bond over something that you're going through. Also, AU has so many clubs, so many organizations. If they have a cheese lovers club, a beekeeping club, a video game club, if you have an interest, I'm pretty sure there's a club for you to attend to and try.
Or you can set one up.
Or you can set one up.
I think these are right on point. I mean, it occurs to me, I hear sometimes a family will say, my student hasn't met anybody. And I think, can we back that up? Let's break this down a little bit. Because your student is enrolled in classes and they're not in that class by themselves. So right. As you have said, there are a whole slew, a classroom full of potential new friends. At the very least, these are people that you already have something in common with, right? So that's a really good starter. And so just as you said, even if you already know the answer, turning and saying, when's that assignment due again? Like, those are the ways that we kind of open these conversations up. I had somebody point out that, when we converted to online instruction, one of the things that kind of got lost in the screen base is that when class is over, the screen tends to just go dark and then that's it. But when we're in real life, the class is over and we pack up and we move out of the room and there's some ambient conversation and some follow-up and some jostling and some questions. And I think that's the natural space for a lot of these connections to happen. So I know some of our faculty have actually really picked up on this, and they have done things like deliberately leaving the Zoom room open when class is over. They'll take themselves out, but let students go ahead and remain in that same virtual space to make those connections. But certainly the classes are one. And I love that you mentioned Cheese Club and the gaming club, because there's some of those popular ones on campus, and those gaming rooms are packed to the greatest extent possible when we're in person every week. So for sure, those are big ones. And I know, as Dr. Ott reminds parents, it's not the how many people that you've met, because social media inflates how things look and how people feel. And the icebreakers are one thing. We can introduce you to a lot of students, but I think for a lot of our students, with the thing that addresses that lonely feeling or that isolation is really feeling like you found a couple go-to people that you can trust to be yourself around. And that's a different friend set. And it does take time. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff for us to all go through. I think we've covered most of the questions that I see that trend. I don't know if you have any parting thoughts or advice for our families.
I think the only parting thing I have is the importance of self-care, not only for your students, but also for yourself. So making sure that you're taking care of yourself as well, because it's an adjustment to you. You're going to your own phase of life, which is having a student in college. So that's definitely my great ending advice for all the parents out there.
I love it. I was thinking about this morning again, as my own college student was texting about some payroll challenges that they encountered, and I thought, I took the advice from another AU parent a while ago, who said this is really the time frame when you get to decide what you want your relationship with your adult child to look like, right? Mm-hmm. And I think I just got to make a decision kind of early to say that my students' stresses are not mine, right? like to really decide and come up with where is my line on this, not everything is going to be a crisis, and it certainly doesn't need to be my crisis. And sometimes the power to address those doesn't rest with me at all, especially in a university setting where it's not my student bill, it's my student's bill, not my bill. And so there are things that, I'll say, I hear you. I know that's really frustrating. Here's what I'd recommend. Put it in writing, do a follow-up. Did you check the right things? Tell me what you've done. So they get the ownership. But I realize it's pretty freeing to kind of say to my student, well, if you didn't get the classes you wanted this semester, I guess there's another semester. Or, I guess that's what a waiting list is for. And then I can go back to my thing. This is my students' educational career and their path and their time to explore and learn, what disappointments matter. Like some of them are weighted more than others. And sometimes I feel like, there's this idea that there's a perfect one way, one trajectory to get to the degree and cross the stage. And there are so many ways to do it. And sometimes it's the most unexpected paths and detours that lead to the greatest gains, right? Mm-hmm. Like the class you never thought you were going to take because you thought you were going to take this very strict linear set, and you stumbled into something because the class you thought you wanted wasn't open. And you've discovered that that's the professor who's now your mentor, like those kind of things, and being open to it. But just kind of trying to separate out that my students' stresses are not necessarily mine. Yeah, they don't have to be. Okay. So I'm right there with you. Well, with this, let me just remind our families again that there's a whole slew of family webinars that we offer throughout the year. I encourage you to come back. And of course, again, you email us at auparent@american.edu. And we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you again, Jackie.
Guys, have a good one. Take care.